Hello, and welcome to Renew, the show about the College of Forest Resources at Mississippi State University. We promote and enable the management, conservation, and wise use of our renewable natural resources. I'm your host, Leslie Berger. Today's show will focus on the Fisheries Unit within the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Aquaculture. Joining me today is Dr. Peter Allen, a faculty member in the department. So welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Pleasure to be here.
I'm glad you're going to be able to join us. You are a fish physiologist. I have to say that very slowly.
It's a tongue twister.
It is.
Yeah.
So explain to me, what is it that a physiologist does?
Well, I think, the simplest way to say it would be that a physiologist looks at how an organism functions. So it's somewhere between the biology and the ecology, and you're looking at the inner workings of an organism. So I think, we think of humans, how we work and how we function a lot. We get sick, we feel healthy, and a lot of that's different processes in us in terms of everything from, enzymes to biochemical reactions.
Right.
And so I study that in fish,
Okay.
which is another organism, a vertebrate, that, and unlike us, there's about 25,000 species of fish. There's a lot to know out there.
That's right.
So
I can see then, from a conservation standpoint, how do you take the health of an individual and then translate that to conservation of our fisheries resources?
That's an excellent question. So a lot of it revolves around trying to understand how an organism normally functions. So if you can understand that, what are the normal processes? What are the limitations that it has to live in the environment? So some fish are amazing. So they live in fresh water,
Right.
they live in salt water, they move back and forth. And so that would be different than, let's say, like a catfish where we're looking at, this is in fresh water. It needs, a suite of temperature, water chemistry, all these things that relate to how its body takes those cues in and arrives at a level that it balances the body's reactions. And we call that homeostasis.
Okay.
So fancy word, but it just
Right.
basically means sort of even keel.
Right.
So
You have a fancy place that you study these things on the university's South Farm, a research facility. And I think we have some pictures that show some of the work that you do at that facility. So could you explain, for example, what's happening in this picture here? It looks like you've got a
Sure.
water tower behind you, and I doubt that's the case.
Yeah, so that pictured there's myself, and I'm working with Daniel Aboyje, he was a former PhD student. And what you may be able to see there is we have a net, and we've just removed a fish out of the tank. And so we're checking out the health of the fish and maybe moving it to another tank perhaps at the same time. That's actually, it's not a water tower in the background, but it does hold water. So in some ways, I guess it's a mini water tower.
Right.
And we are fortunate here at Mississippi State to have all kinds of tanks like that, and ponds as well. This picture, what you see here, these are conservation species, and they're an aquaculture species. So our fisheries program uses both a lot, and it's called paddlefish. And literally because it looks like it has
A
a
large
paddle
paddle.
sticking right out of its head.
Right.
Presumably it helps it to swim better and maintain, I guess, its movement through the water with little movement. And we have these all around us in Mississippi. They're in Mississippi River. They're in our backyard here in Starkville too. They're down in the Noxubee Refuge. But so we look at a lot of these types of species to figure out what do they need. And as our environment changes, we have population growth, we do some water diversions, we do some habitat modifications. How does this impact the fish?
Right.
And so that's really where physiology comes into play too. This is another fish. This is a graduate student that was working on the Mississippi River system, and he's holding actually kind of a really neat fish, a primitive type of fish. It's called a sturgeon.
Right.
And these are either a shovel-nosed sturgeon right there, and you can also see it's got a little tag in the back of it too.
So you have one of these items here then?
We do.
So this is the tag here, and then do these syringes have anything to do with how you put the tag in, or are they completely unrelated?
The syringes are actually unrelated.
Okay, well, good.
But they are related to taking blood samples and understanding how fish work. So this is a tag, and it's called a T-bar tag, and so if you look at it, it actually looks like a little T right there. And so this is implanted into the fish, and then there's a little code that sticks up there too.
Right.
So let's say that Leslie, you're working out in the river and you caught this fish, and that one of my students, say Carlin, had tagged this fish, and then you could look at it and say, hey, this is fish 3601.
Right.
And if you measured that fish or weighed it, or you looked at your location on a GPS, then you know, hey, this fish moved 30 miles in 6 months, something like that, and it grew a whole pound or something like that.
Right.
So, great. And I've got some other props here too, if I can explain to you.
Yes, I think we have just a few minutes before we have to take a break, so yes.
Very good. So in fisheries, we do all kinds of things. We do physiology as well, and so this is actually, these are 2 syringes, and this is what's called a 3-way stopcock, and so you could hook up a tube here, and the tube would actually go inside the fish, and so we could take blood samples, and we could turn it off, turn it on, we could draw or whatnot, or we could push in some type of pharmaceutical or something like that as well, and look at how do the fish respond, what do they need to become healthy.
So you tell the fish to just hold still, this won't hurt, or how do you get the fish to collaborate with you on this endeavor?
Yeah, I wish I was that smooth, but I'm not that smooth. So what I do is, we actually have an anesthetic, just like if you go into your doctor, you put on the little mask, count backwards to 100. I think I get to about 98, and then I'm out.
Right.
And so we do that with fish as well. Doesn't hurt them or harm them at all. And then we'll actually take a blood sample, and then we can revive them afterwards and make sure they're okay.
Good. That is really interesting. I know you work a lot with graduate students, and after the break, we're going to be visiting one of your students, Colin Dinkin. So I appreciate you coming by and teaching us a little bit more about the physiology of fish and how we use that in our management and conservation of our fisheries resources. We'll be right back after just a short break.
Discovery. It tells our history and determines our future. At Mississippi State University, we're digging deep, unlocking an understanding of our past, validating it. Middle East exploration by faculty and students is uncovering evidence that unravels ancient mysteries. Scholars have long thought of the biblical kings David and Solomon as mythological figures. Our research offers evidence that supports their existence, boosting MSU into an international league of experts on archaeology. Now we're changing the way people think about the past, opening up new possibilities of understanding for future generations. Digging deeper, learning more. Imagine a world where there's enough food to feed everyone. We are at Mississippi State University, where we ring true.
Welcome back. Joining me now is Colin Dinkin, a graduate student in the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Aquaculture. Thank you for joining me, Colin.
Hey, great to be here.
So you're originally from Alabama. How did you end up over here in Mississippi?
Well, I was looking for a grad student position at the time, and I had a friend who was working with me, and he happened to be checking the job boards too, and he found this position, and it sounded really interesting, and he wasn't ready to go back to school, so he told me about it, and here I am.
And you applied and you got it.
I did,
well, that's wonderful.
Fortunately.
Right. So for a master's program within our field, we require the graduate students to do research.
Yes, ma'am.
So what research is it that you are doing?
I'm looking at various conditions during, I guess, largemouth bass fishing tournaments. So largemouth bass tournaments are really popular. There's a concern for the health and survival of fish afterwards.
Right.
Not all of them survive these tournaments.
Right.
And it's been found that things like ambient water temperature have a positive correlation with mortality. So we're looking at various conditions such as ambient water temperature and live well water temperature to reduce the mortality and stress response of bass.
Okay, so we have a picture here, we have a picture of some fish in what appears to be a live well, or something that simulates a live well. Is this related to your research that you're doing?
Yes, ma'am, it is. That is an actual Ranger live well that they donated to us, and we have 4 of them. And what we do is we acclimate the fish to one of 5 ambient water temperatures, simulating different times of the year.
Right.
And we chase them with a dip net to simulate stress during angling.
Right.
And then we place them in live wells containing different temperatures, so they either go into cooler live wells or warmer live wells, or live wells of the same temperature.
Okay, so you're simulating the conditions that would actually be happening in a real tournament, where somebody gets the fish out, they put them in the live well, they hold them there until all the fish are,
That's right.
are measured and released, and then turned back loose again
Exactly.
Afterwards. Okay.
We're trying to find optimum conditions.
Okay. So in this photo here of graduate student Kevin Keritz, that's a largemouth bass he's got there. What is he doing?
That is a largemouth bass, and he is either putting that bass into the live well or taking it out, and I believe taking it out. So we held them in there for up to 8 hours, and then subjected them to a simulated weigh-in procedure where
Okay.
we simulated weighing the fish at the end of the tournament,
Right.
and then releasing them back into
Right.
the pond.
Because that in and of itself is going to be stressful to the fish. They're not used to being handled like your dog or
Handled,
cat,
that's right.
and so I can understand why that would be stressful. And so this picture here is showing then the measurements that you do as part of a real bass tournament. You're replicating that as well?
That's right. We're getting lengths and weights, and we're also taking blood to measure the stress response and levels of stress in the blood. And it doesn't look like I know what I'm doing there, but I promise I do. It
Well,
wasn't
that's
my
good.
first time.
I'm sure Dr. Allen is glad to know that that's
right.
what's going on. So the goal of all this is to get a degree
That's right.
and get a job. So where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
I have a couple different things I'm interested in. I'd like to work for a state management agency, possibly here in the Southeast. I'm open to other options, or I've also been very interested in small impoundment management,
Right.
Private fishing ponds and all that. So.
Do you have a favorite memory or a story that you can share with us from your experience here as a graduate student?
Not a favorite, but I do have a lot of stories.
Well, I guess you're going to have to share those with me later on, because
That's right.
I've been told that we're run out of time, but I
Okay.
look forward to hearing more about that. And I thank you for spending time sharing what your research is about here at Mississippi State.
Appreciate
I thank
it.
the rest of you for joining us here on Renew. I hope you've learned a little bit more about the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Aquaculture's Fisheries Research Unit and the graduate program that we have here. Thank you for taking time out of your day, and I hope that you'll come back and join us again on Renew. Until then, enjoy your time in the natural resources. I've been your host, Leslie Berger.